Hey, well, what's up, Colliders? Daniel here, and movies are coming back. Finally, theaters are opening up. We're finally getting some new movies. But I'm here to talk about a movie that actually has already come out. Raya and the Last Dragon. It's kind of flown under the radar. It came out in theaters, but because of COVID, and it was on Disney Plus. But a lot of people didn't want to pay $30 to watch it, and so it's kind of just hasn't got the buzz or the talk that maybe it should, but it's coming again. It'll be dropping on Disney Plus for free in just a couple weeks. So I've seen it, so let's talk about it. So this movie had me at the word dragon. If you guys know, I'm a dragon buff. Right in the very front of our living room when you walk into my house is a big dragon side table. Anything with dragons, you got me interested in this movie. When the first teaser came out, I was intrigued. Not just because it was about dragons, but it just looked engaging. It looked interesting. It looked like kind of a fresh take on kind of the traditional kids animated films that you get. And kind of unlike a lot of movies that have been coming out lately, this film did not disappoint. This is an excellent movie. I know sometimes I get some flack, some feedback that, do I even like movies? I tend to be so harsh on so many of these movies that have been coming out. But the reality is that a lot of these movies have just been bad. There just haven't been a lot of good movies lately. And Raya and the Last Dragon kind of bucks that trend. And really from top to bottom, this is just a good film that I think can be enjoyed by people of all ages. The premise of this movie, so there's a land where dragons and people live in harmony, very prosperous, but this evil plague, these kind of spiritual demonic forces rise, and they start kind of wreaking havoc across the land, stealing people's souls, turning them into stone. Again, the people are powerless against this. Ultimately, the dragons have to sacrifice themselves, pour their magic into some gemstone to kind of free the people. But again, as people are people, and soon, even though they're free, they start fighting over possession of this gem, this stone, this power, this kind of mythical artifact. And as tensions rise, the stone shatters, the people are divided, the evil forces are released again, and it's sort of up to Raya, this princess, kind of guardian of this gemstone, to go and find the last dragon, the kind of mythical last dragon, and try and restore peace back to the land. And this story just follows her journey of doing that. And the way it tells the story is just really well done. And I guess probably there's a lot of things that are going well for this movie, but probably the two areas that I think really elevate this into kind of beyond the standard kind of average animated films are the visuals and the characters. Visually speaking, this is a beautiful film. This is I wasn't at the start of the film. I wasn't quite sold on the animation of the people, the characters themselves. But again, I kind of warmed up to that. But the animation of like the landscape and the world is gorgeous. Some of these shots of this sort of dystopian landscape as Raya is traveling through it is this bursting with sort of interesting kind of history and things off to the side. And again, if you're watching on your screen, you're going to want to pause it just to kind of catch some of this stuff. It's a gorgeous animated film, and it's just filled with fresh ideas too. And the standard style throughout the movie is interesting, but there's several kind of sequences or things that they do where the film kind of adopts like a 2D animation and just sort of does some fresh, unique stuff with it. And I just found it interesting. It's you never kind of get bored with the style. It's always switching it up just enough, throwing new things that visually this is just a really an artfully made film. The second thing would be the characters, and blessedly, as someone that reviews these films and sees a lot of these kids films, has two kids, forced to watch a lot, none of these characters are annoying. And again, if you have kids, you know that is a blessing from God. That there's no grating voices or just characters that are just yelling all the time. There's not just a bombardment of like cheap kind of potty poop jokes. Again, there's none of that. There's humor. There's quirkiness, but it's all more natural. It always comes out in the dialogue and the banters. They're never. I would say the characters themselves are endearing. They kind of draw you in, but they're never demanding. They're never like yelling and trying to get you to pay attention, trying to get you to laugh and to love them. They just sort of are because they're fun, because they're quirky. And there's like a con artist baby. There's a big creature. There's a big there's quirky characters, but kind of at their core, they're all human. They're all deeply relatable. another word maybe to use is nuanced. I think this is a film where the characters are flawed, but not in a way that's, okay, this character's one vice, it's their one defining characteristic, and everything is about them overcoming this one problem. I would say all the characters are flawed, but not in a real easy to pinpoint way. I think they're human. They respond to situations kind of inconsistently, maybe, or selfishly in some sense, and they all have struggles, but they're human. It's a very human story. It's in a world filled with dragons and stuff. This is one of the most kind of just relatably human kids movies, animated films that I've seen in quite a while. As far as this content to consider, really there's nothing. There's nothing to be concerned about as a parent. As far as like on the surface content, we'll get into some of the worldview in just a moment. But again, there's no profanity, there's no sexuality, there's no violence. If you have young kids or that are maybe sensitive, there's maybe some scary imagery. The evil creatures can be frightening, but again, there's nothing gratuitous in the way it's portrayed. It's just evil is shown as evil. It's not sugar-coated. And again, I think that's to the movie's strength. But again, if you have sensitive young kids or viewers, you'd probably want to be aware of that. As far as the themes of this movie, I think there's probably two that stood out to me as I was watching. And the first one, it's pretty explicit. It's sort of this idea of unity and trust, disunity, all these different people and different coming at it from different places, how they need to kind of be brought together and how they don't trust each other and they want to fight and they can't just kind of get along in harmony. And again, this theme, I think just as a byproduct of our society that doesn't reflect that theme. It's not necessarily a novel one. There's been a lot of movies lately about, kind of overcoming our prejudices and stereotypes and kind of, overcoming our fear of the unknown other and kind of getting along. So again, that on its own isn't necessarily unique, but I think the way that the film actually navigates that theme is fresh, and it is, I would say, a more mature kind of grappling with that theme. And again, with most of these other kind of similar films, sort of the answer, kind of the solution that these films offer for kind of this disunity and distrust is sort of more knowledge. It's kind of educating ourselves. You have these different people groups or different characters that don't trust each other, and they think each other is sort of different stereotypes, and kind of on their adventures when they're thrown together, they learn that, hey, we're not so different, you and I, and they kind of overcome their differences and kind of get along. So really kind of, the solution to the problem is just we need to educate ourselves more and learn more about these other people. Raya and the Last Dragon kind of takes a different approach to that. Again, these characters are unique there are cultural differences made most clear kind of visually. The story itself doesn't really emphasize the differences, but kind of the problem that the film diagnoses for the lack of unity is a heart problem. It's a heart condition. It's our own pride. It's our own kind of brokenness. It's our own kind of pain within that keeps us from trusting. And kind of rather than just suggesting, hey, you just got to learn more about other people and then you'll be able to accept them and get along, the film kind of suggests, no, this is a kind of a spiritual problem. This is not a head issue, it's a heart issue. And you need to have some character growth. You need to learn to forgive and kind of grow as a person to be the kind of person that can overcome these prejudices. And again, I think, obviously this is a kind of a movie geared towards kids. I think it's a more mature way of dealing with that theme. Again, it doesn't diminish the kind of the differences of these different kind of cultural groups, but it's saying that the solution is more internal and not just sort of filling our mind with more learning. I think that's definitely a relevant thing in today's society for sure. The second theme I would say that comes out in this film, again, I'm typically resist trying to kind of force these Hollywood films to conform to some kind of C.S. Lewis-esque allegory. I don't think there's a whole lot of value in trying to make it preach some Christian message that the film itself is clearly not trying to preach. But there are some metaphors and some kind of visual imagery that I think definitely, if not is teaching kind of Christian truth, is definitely reflecting it. And I think it's kind of reflecting kind of the theological, biblical truth of just sin and kind of fallen nature and salvation. Again, this is made explicit in the film. They're talking about why is there so much tension and hatred going on in this land? And one of the characters says, because people being people. This is a film that seems to affirm kind of this fallen nature, that we are sinful people. You put enough people together, there's going to be conflict, there's going to be selfishness, and kind of the issue is just that we are broken as society, as humans, and even these creatures, these sort of spiritual, the Dern they're called, these terrifying creatures that are kind of going around and stealing people's souls. And at one point, one of the characters is kind of explaining where these come from, saying they've always been around. They were sort of born from human discontent. They were sort of, in some ways, they almost serve as like a metaphor for just our sin. As long as there's been hatred and selfishness, these creatures have existed, and they've been corrupting. They've been stealing people's souls until ultimately these people need a savior. They need a sacrifice. They need these dragons to kind of to come and save them from this evilness. And again, any analogy, any allegory, you can only stretch it so far before it snaps. And this definitely isn't a perfect one for one. Near the end of the film, it kind of veers maybe more into self-empowerment, or ultimately we can do the same if we just learn to trust and sacrifice. And so again, I'm not suggesting that this is some kind of biblical allegory, but I think just because it's not a one for one, doesn't necessarily discredit the fact that there is definitely some kind of potent visuals and kind of thematic elements that are reflective of biblical truth, of sort of the Christian story. And I think that this film could be an effective tool to have those discussions and kind of, this the image of this sin, this kind of creeping around the land, looking for more souls to devour, and kind of making people isolate and dividing cultures. I think it's a rich theme that I think even for a kids movie, there's a lot for older viewers to really dig into as Christians and begin to process. So in the end, again, this is a film I loved. I thought it was a great film. It's sort of unfortunate that because of the kind of the untraditional rollout of this film, that it kind of flew under the radar. It's not a film that everyone saw it, at one weekend and everyone's talking about it and praising it. People are just sort of seeing it at different times throughout several months. And so I don't know if it's going to ever kind of become some kind of classic. And again, I don't know if it's necessarily a film that I could see my kids just wanting to watch over and over and over. And it is lacking some of just that goofy kind of quirkiness and some of that kind of tends to kind of get kids really obsessed and becomes their new favorite film. But I think what it makes up for in some of those areas, or what it lacks in those areas, it makes up for just in being a mature and kind of deeper story. It's not a boring story. There's humor, there's action, but again, it's dealing with more human, relatable, mature themes, and I think it's also dealing with them in a more kind of mature way. And I think as Christians, again, as long as sort of the magic and some of that, dragon magic, and obviously not consistent with like a biblical worldview, as long as that kind of surface level coat of paint isn't a deal breaker for you, I think beneath the surface, at the core of this movie, there's just a lot of really good lessons and value for a Christian to process. And again, I think even to have younger children watch and kind of talk through with them. But again, if you guys have seen this movie, if you guys are planning to check it out, let me know what you think. Let me know if you guys enjoyed this movie as much as I did. Maybe if you saw some stuff in it that I didn't, if you were more turned off by some of the magic and some of that element, or if you saw some themes in it that maybe I didn't. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And I want to thank you guys for checking out this review, checking our channel. I encourage you guys to subscribe to our channel. We got live streams every week. We got reviews. We got a whole bunch of stuff going on. We'd love for you guys to become a collider, join with what we're doing here. Make sure you like this video. Guys, have a great week and continue to collide with your world for Christ.